thumbs up if you can hear me okay in the back there. Excellent, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kathy Howse. I'm a vice president at Schafer Cullen Capital Management. We are delighted to be one of the sponsors here at the Global Trends Conference. I'm joined actually today by a colleague of mine, Garrett. I'll give him a second to make an introduction in just a minute here. But we have for you today, I think, a pretty fun and dynamic presentation talking about leadership and emotional intelligence. And if you think about today and tomorrow, you're going to be really capturing a ton of information about market trends, ideas, wealth management, portfolio management, solutions, all of these things. But what happens when we get back to the office and we have that team meeting or we're sitting down with a client about delivering that information? What if the client comes into the office and what's on their mind has to do with trying to get their kids through college or the fact that they don't like their daughter's new boyfriend? Where does that human connection that we have to also really work on come in? And we're all leaders in this room in one capacity or another, whether that's in our families, in our just daily lives, in our churches, communities, and you're certainly a leader to the clients that you're serving. So we really want to stress this topic today about leadership and really work on the skills that become the foundation of that, and all of that really lies within emotional intelligence. So quick housekeeping thing, on your tables is either a sign-in sheet or a QR code. If you hold a CFP or a designation from Investments and Wealth Institute, if you're a CIMA or CPWA, RMA, please sign that so that you can get 1 hour of CE credit for attending the presentation today. The QR code also has a form that you can do that digitally. There's also a good number of resources around these topics that we at Schafer Cullen want to provide to you as well. So let me give Garrett a little bit of a chance to introduce himself and kind of also talk about how we as a firm have gotten into this topic.
Thanks, Kathy. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Garrett Pierce. Excited to be here. Our firm was one of the original firms that was working with Patty and team, Global Trends. So I don't know how many years ago that was now, 14 years ago. So this is the first time we've made it to the stage, so hopefully we impress. So why did Schafer Cullen develop this content? It's a good question. Quite honestly, we had a client of ours that came to us and said, look, you know, the days of you coming in and pitching product are going away or done, right? We've heard that for quite some years, and most firms had value-add programs. And so at my prior firm, I was taking a master's degree program at Bentley University in Boston. And I had the opportunity to take a class with a person by the name of Jim Grubman. And you'll learn a little bit more about Jim and his expertise. But Jim Grubman is often thought as a thought leader, grandfather in this whole EQ, intergenerational wealth. And so when I came over to Schafer Cullen Capital, I reached out to Jim. And he had moved into more of a kind of a think tank in terms of, you know, passing on a lot of these skills, education to the broader industry, and introduced us to a person by the name of Jeff Stresa. Jeff is part of the Family Office Exchange, and is a common contributor to CNBC, et cetera, et cetera. And so we developed this content. We think there's some great content here, but also some actionable takeaways. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kathy.
All right. So just, again, a little bit more on who Schafer Cullen is. We're a boutique manager based in New York City. We manage about $23 billion in total assets. As those here today, as we meet face-to-face, you're going to learn a lot more about our strategies. But here's basically a kind of overview of the different portfolios that we have. If any of these are also of interest, please fill out that QR code. We're happy to send you information talking about this. But really at our core, we are disciplined value managers. So we approach stock picking, looking for undervalued companies we want to hold for the long term, and run relatively concentrated portfolio. It's where we specialize. We know we do this very well. And so we're happy to talk a little bit more also afterwards about our portfolios.
So a quick show of hands. Who's heard of this concept, S-curves? You? Okay, great. So the idea behind S-curves is that every business, even the great ones, eventually run out of room to grow. And so they always have to be thinking about that next product, the next service they're bringing to the table, and it's called jumping the S-curve, right? And so we can think of many companies that have done that well and some that have not, right? So think about, most of us probably either have a Samsung or an iPhone in your pocket. And you think about, when the iPhone first came out, basically it was a phone. You could take photos, but think about all the additional services that have come with that: subscription, streaming. It's really in the power that's in your hand or in your pocket. And so Apple, and there's many of them out there, is a great example of a company that well before their businesses or a business segment is beginning to mature, they're already thinking about the next S-curve and how they can jump that S-curve and continue the growth. And we can also think of many companies that have not done that well. From originally the Boston area, so Kodak and Polaroid, two great examples, right? Blockbuster. I mean, that was like back in the day, that was the stock. And interestingly, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy in 2013 to shield essentially $1 billion in debt. And the last movie that was sold was in Hawaii. It's called This Is the End. And so the idea is that high-performing businesses, teams, financial advisors also need to be thinking about jumping the S-curve. And we're going to tie that to a few concepts. So stay with that for a minute. I mentioned at the onset a person by the name of Jim Grubman. Jim Grubman and Dennis Jaffe is also a very well-known name. And Jim and Dennis Jaffe, as I said, are the thought leaders. They've written an article that's called Wealth 3.0. They've also written a book. But the article is a very short 4-page article, has some great concepts in here that we're going to get into in terms of what's happening in our industry, giving a historical perspective and where things are likely to go. So, before we go there,
I'm trying to put it together. Nice car. We live in the same building. I'm not understand how much money you make.
I don't know, 70,000 last month. I'm serious.
Yeah, no, I'm serious too. Seriously, how much money you make?
I told you, 70,000. Well, technically 72,000 last month.
You made 72 grand in 1 month.
Yeah.
I tell you what. You show me a pay stub for $72,000 on it, I quit my job right now and I work for you. Hey, Paulie, what's up? No, no, everything's fine. Hey, listen, I quit.
So, Wolf of Wall Street, Leo and Jonah, and obviously a little satire there. But when you think about the evolution of the wealth management industry, it's really what Dennis and Jim Grubman talk about. There's really kind of 3 periods of time, but they're not necessarily all separate. That there are people who are still in Wealth 1.0 as financial advisors that haven't necessarily jumped those S-curves. So there's still some of those folks that are out there. And so the idea is that if you think about it, I started in the industry in 1995. In high school, so this was in the 80s, I remember I was at my parents' house, the phone rings, I pick up the phone. Is Garrett Pierce there? Speaking. Garrett, I'd like to pitch you a stock idea. IBM. You know IBM, just right up the road, right? Upstate New York. It's a great stock, great valuation, et cetera, et cetera. So he was pitching me a stock idea. I said, hey, that's great. The only problem is you got the wrong Garrett. My dad's Garrett. I'm Garrett in high school. So the idea, though, is that it was a transactional business, right? There wasn't a lot of collaboration going on between stockbrokers, insurance agents, estate planners. Everything was done in silos, right? And so now we come to Wealth 2.0. And this is from really, call it 1985 on. As I said, I started in the industry in 1995 at Fidelity Investments. I was an internal wholesaler. I remember being on the phones, and I remember talking with financial advisors. And at that point in time, how they were differentiating themselves in terms of the value they brought to their clients was, we build better stock portfolios. We build better mutual fund portfolios. We generate more alpha, right? And so that was the kind of the value add at that point in time. And at that same point in time, I enrolled in the CFP program at Boston University, and I started learning about all these different aspects of financial planning, how they can come together in a comprehensive financial plan. And then you really just saw the evolution and how financial planning took off during this period of time. But what Jim and Dennis talk about during this period of time, most of the concept selling was really focused around trying to create some sort of short sleeve to short sleeve in 3 generations, more fear-based. If you don't protect those assets, Johnny's going to go out, he's going to go out and buy a Porsche, and within a few years, all that money's gone. We need to set up trusts, we need to set up a bank trustee, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was a lot of what came up. Now, there was still a massive evolution in the industry in terms of all the planning aspects, and all the technical aspects that you as financial advisors are bringing to your clients. And really, from call it 2015 on, what Jim and Dennis talk about is Wealth 3.0. And here, it's still leveraging all the building blocks from Wealth 1.0, 2.0, and also 3.0, but really it's now really coming at it from certainly IQ, but more EQ. And some of the best financial advisors, you watch them, they know how to orchestrate a meeting, team members. They can read body language. They can draw somebody in. If somebody's on their cell phone in the back room and say, hey, listen up. Or somebody's not engaging. Maybe it's a husband and wife, and maybe the husband's not engaging in the conversation. Somebody who's got really great EQ has the ability to engage people and draw people into a conversation. And also, what they're doing as well is really trying to understand what's going on beyond just maybe that first generation, the second, third, fourth, fifth generation, and other EQ qualities and leadership qualities. So preparing kids to inherit a large sum of money. So going back to that Wealth 2.0, a lot of it was more fear-based. Keep it quiet. They don't need to know about all this money. Now it's more empowerment, getting people ready to inherit that money and teaching them financial skills, leadership skills, and the like. What they also talk about here is the evolution of family wealth advisors. And I was just at a conference 2 weeks ago, and Jim Grubham was presenting. It was really interesting. What he was talking about is the evolution of family wealth, but also when you look at what they define as mass affluent, $2.5 million to $5 million, ultra high net worth or high net worth up to $25 million, and then ultra high net worth is $25 million above. But what they really talk about is really the client goals are very, very different in each of those segments. And while you think you may want to take on that $100 million relationship, the skill set that's required, the needs of those clients are very, very vastly different than somebody that maybe has $5 or $10 million. And so what you can see in terms of the skill set that you need to develop, in terms of the facilitation, the collaboration, and it really comes from what your role is. We always hear the trusted advisor, right? So in the mass affluent space. But as you start to go up in net worth, it gets much more complex and their needs, and whether it's kids who are not ready to inherit money, kids who have substance abuse issues, mental health issues. And so really what they talk about is having the skill set, not that you're an expert, but having the skill set to be able to have a conversation around these aspects that aren't necessarily tied into those technical aspects that you all know so well. Having the CFP, the SEMA, the CFA designation. So upping the game and the skill set that's needed to continue to evolve with the industry. So what we're trying to avoid is the situation with Tommy Boy. If you remember from the movie, Tommy Boy inherited all this money, and he had to figure out the hard way. He had to go out and try to figure out how he was going to save his dad's business and how he was going to go out and really develop his own leadership style. And his dad never prepared him for that. And maybe in part that was part of the lesson he was trying to teach him, is that you need to go out and do it on your own. But what we want to do is make sure that the next generation or the future generations are being prepared in a healthy and a leadership way.
All right, and so what's going to be Wealth 4.0? That could very well be what is this, evolution within AI, to where a lot of the research and tools and stuff is going to be, a lot more efficiently delivered and everything. But what that can't replace is that human connection that you either have with your teams or with your individual clients. So we're going to go a little bit step deeper here to talk about the skills. Skills are different from talents. People just don't wake up in the morning and have, empathy right off the bat, right? Skills take, consistent dedication to building over and over and over again. So here's just to kind of look a little bit deeper into what are the foundations that make up emotional intelligence. The big one to start is self-awareness. Self-awareness, just by definition, the ability to recognize and understand your moods, emotions, drivers. It's not about being emotional. It's about being able to identify, how do I feel in this moment? Where you see hallmarks of people that have really high levels of self-awareness is they tend to be, confident in what they're doing, but they also are realistic. They can call themselves out when they know that they are beyond their means when it comes to, dealing with a sophisticated client, like one of those ultra high net worth clients, and they need to bring in other experts. That is a high degree of self-awareness. It is different from self-regulation, though. Being able to self-regulate means how you can control those emotions, those reactions that you have when an email sets you off or your drive to work sets you off. So high hallmarks of good levels of self-regulation would be openness to change, more flexibility, being able to adjust in the moment as well. Motivation is a big thing. We all have to stay motivated. We all hit walls from time to time in this business, And so having a passion for your work is super important. And clients feel that. Clients feel the difference between when they're talking to an advisor who is just reading from a script, who just is going down what the model told them that they need to do to invest your money, and those that really have a vision for you as well, who want to see your successes come true. So a good hallmark of that is that organizational commitment, having optimism, more positive speech when you're talking with clients, being able to share those success stories. Empathy. Empathy is huge when it comes to EQ. The ability to understand the makeup of other people, being able to actually relate to them at their level, that there isn't a hierarchy from one side of the table to the other, that we are all the same. Some people might have better shoes or a nicer car, but at the end of the day, that we all can understand that other people have similar emotions to us. And then social skills. This is what we're practicing today and tonight as we engage and network. We were all kind of set back with the pandemic. So these are skills that still need to be continued to work on, day to day in our practices. So as we think about all of these skills, there's probably people that come to mind that you might think, wow, this is somebody that I look to that would be a good, a good example of them. So just to highlight a couple of them for you, clearly Steve Jobs had an insane vision for what he wanted with Apple. His idea was to bring technology to the masses, and we're all thankful. We all probably have an iPhone or an iPad or an iMac or something of his, part of that vision that he had, but he really exemplified that. Someone like Oprah, who can sit down with people from all over, all walks of life, and really, really connect to them. Continuous learning. I think Elon Musk is a great example of someone who over time has gone from so many different subject matters, from PayPal to Tesla to SpaceX to what is he doing now? He's a Neuralink, all of these things that just drive to keep wanting to learn in different fields. Great example of that. Jeff Bezos of Amazon, obviously data-driven, has taken risks for the long term, for a lot of future growth. The thing about each one of these individuals, though, is that they don't exhibit all of them. Steve Jobs had great vision, but he wasn't the most empathetic guy on the planet, right? You could probably say the same thing about Elon Musk. So the point is that there are so many different categories of EQ. When you say, I have high EQ, that must mean you think that you have all of these things at a high level at once, and that is not the truth. We all know that we can take a step aside and look at ourselves and say, all right, I might have pretty good self-awareness, but I need to work on my self-regulation. So think about that as you kind of go back and digest some of this information as to where are the areas that you want to work on in your lives, within your teams, within your clients as well. And let's also just kind of ask through, who are some of the people, when you think about a great leader, what individuals come to mind for you? Anybody want to volunteer and answer? Anybody?
Speak up.
Who is it? Jurgen Klopp. Tell me about Jurgen Klopp. Why is he a great leader?
He's a great football coach that manages little talent to great outcomes.
Excellent.
Maybe Bill Belichick.
What do you think of those EQ characteristics he had the best of? Vision. Vision. Okay. Excellent. Anybody else want to volunteer and answer? Jack Welch. Okay. Of those characteristics, where do you think he excelled?
Again, I'd say vision.
Vision.
Understanding the S-curve.
Okay.
Lead an area, improve to
Okay. Excellent. And then for each, we kind of did that just now. What kind of leadership qualities sort of made them excellent? Thank you for your participation. I'm a big fan of Oprah. I want to share this clip with you because I think it really hits on one of these qualities.
And I just had a conversation with John Mackey, who runs Whole Foods, and has written this fabulous book. You should get it, called Conscious Capitalism. And he was talking about how the investment in the stakeholders, the people who you are serving, that connection between the people who you're trying to serve and sell to, is equally as important as the people who you're buying from, equally as important as the people who are, supporting you financially, as your stockholders if you are, a public company. So I always understood that there really was no difference between me and the audience. At times I might have had better shoes, but at the core of what really matters, that we are the same. And when I sit down to talk to somebody, whether I'm talking to a murderer, I sat down, I interviewed a guy who'd killed his twin daughters. I've interviewed child molesters, trying to figure out what it is they do and why they do it. Obviously, lots of people who've been victimized through molestation. Presidents, politicians, Beyonce herself.
Beyonce.
At the end of every interview, the murderer to Beyonce, the question everybody asks that you mentioned is, was that okay? How was that? Everybody says that. And now I just wait for it. Was that okay? Was that okay? And when I finish, I'll say to you, was that okay?
I'm going to ask you too.
Okay. You're very okay. You're doing very okay. Very okay. Very okay.
I think that's fascinating because Oprah has interviewed over 30,000 people in her career. And the key thing with each one of those interviews is at the end, that question, did I do okay? Was that okay? We are all seeking some kind of validation for how we feel, what we say, what we're doing. And I really think that when you sit down with the client too, that they also are seeking that kind of validation. They have all these thoughts in their head, all these concerns, the fears and everything. And they need to know, am I gonna be okay? Are you gonna help me get there, right? That's the trust that's trying to be built between you as the advisor and the client. So and that just, again, is all under the umbrella of empathy, being able to read those emotions of people and validate them as well.
There's always this gap between what we perceive is going on in the mountains and what's actually going on. It's not Disney World. That's why it's special. As a veteran, you feel like I've really narrowed that gap and I can perceive what nature is telling me. I can read the signs around me. You just looked down, you knew, like, life's gonna be different. Permanently.
So that's somebody who's probably a little less well known, but his name is Zahan Billamora. He's a big mountain ski guide in Jackson, Wyoming. And you think about what he has to do as a guide and the EQ he's got to have, right? He's got to be able to read his clientele to see whether or not they're struggling. Maybe they're fearful in terms of when you think about what happens and the consequences. In this case here, two of his friends died. And Zahan is in the past few years been caught in 2 avalanches. So avalanches are obviously one of the risks that are out there, but there are many, many, many other risks that are out there. So as a guide, he's got to be able to read his clientele to be able to assess whether or not they can still move forward. Or at some point in time, he may say, look, we're making a call. We're going to turn around. And so thinking about these different concepts, as financial advisors, when you go into a meeting, people are so eager just to spit out their ideas. I got this recommendation for you. I want you to do this. You need to get this done today. But maybe taking a step back and doing some active listening and kind of trying to hear from your clientele or the folks that are there is a skill set that ultimately needs to be developed. And it takes time. It's not something that just happens overnight. You have to work at it.
All right, so how can you work at it? We said we were going to talk about some takeaways, some actionable ideas today. One of the things that we're really stressing here is that skill development takes the work. It takes the attention to it. It takes a commitment to do so. And a gentleman by the name of James Clear came up with a fantastic book called Atomic Habits. Just raise your hand if you've read that book. I love that. I love it. We're going to talk a little bit, share some of what's within Atomic Habits today, because this is a great way. This kind of helps set a foundation for how you can take some of these ideas, some of this awareness that we've just garnered today, and really start to begin to put it into action. So one of the things that James Clear did was he created what's called a habit loop. So let me explain what the habit loop does. So first of all, to really get on board and stick to a habit, there's kind of 4 components to it. The first one is to make whatever you're trying to achieve, let's just say it's engaging with my team members, to make it obvious, okay? That can be as simple as setting a calendar alert. All right, I'm gonna have lunch with my team members on Friday. We're gonna go out, it's gonna be fun, we're gonna get to know them better. If, let's say, one of your habits you wanna work on is getting in better shape, making it obvious, you could put your shoes at your door. That's your obvious cue. Okay, I'm gonna go walk, or I'm gonna go run outside, whatever it is. If you wanna learn guitar, put your guitar in the middle of the living room. You'll see it, it'll become an obvious thing that will, again, get your attention. That's the first thing. If something doesn't get our attention, we put it to the side, we forget about it, it doesn't become a habit. The second part is the craving. Make this new habit attractive to yourself. You have to basically create a dopamine spike in your brain. Now what happens is that we actually get that spike in anticipation of an activity. It's not when the actual activity is happening, it's anticipating that something exciting is going to happen to us. So we have to sort of create that. And you can do that, again, just by, creating a linkage between something you enjoy with the habit that you want to do. So for example, if you want to get in shape, maybe that means that while you are walking outside, you get to listen to a podcast that you love or a book on Audible that you've been wanting to read. That's going to be the linkage of something you enjoy with the habit you're trying to create that brings it together. The third part of the habit loop is making it easy. And he talks about something as simple as creating a 2-minute rule. Whatever you're trying to do, it shouldn't take more than 2 minutes to get started. So that could, again, be setting the calendar alert, preparing your research at your desk so that when you sit down the next morning, it's there to read. It could be just little things like that that are just, again, easy ways to get started. And then the last piece of the loop is to make it satisfying, for there to be some kind of reward. We don't stick with habits unless they actually work and do something good for us. That's why when people try and work out and they don't see themselves losing weight, they give up. Well, what if there was the reward that, okay, I work out, I go walk 5 days a week, and I can go have a massage on Saturday? Something that's got to be there, that's got to keep you working at these habits. The loop is incredibly important, because if you don't have a piece of this, the habits break down and they don't become habits themselves. So one of the takeaways that we have actually in the QR code is for you to be able to write down some goals for yourself. They can be personal, they can be professional. It can be that sitting down with your team members, going to lunch, writing a thank you note to a client, doing something that kind of helps you, again, build that human capital that we're stressing today, and then try and track it. And there is some satisfaction in just seeing, oh my gosh, I've done this for 7 days in a row. That keeps you going in that when you see that you're making progress towards a goal. And I promise you, just like within our industry, when we talk about doing something over and over, that compounding effect, it comes through actually in this type of work as well. So if you were to make a 1% change in your day, every day for a year, you would be almost 40% better by the end of that year. And the same thing happens in reverse. We do something negative 1%, every day you work your way down to 0. So there is a true mathematical compounding effect when it comes to building these habits or stacking habits that will actually help get to those goals. So please read that book by James Clear, because I think there's some really great takeaways also in there. And think about these habits, because that's how you take all of this skill development that we've talked about and actually begin to incorporate it in our lives.
Maybe just one other thing just to mention at the end here is when you think about these, it's incremental, right? So, you're not going to become a great question person maybe right off the bat. And so incrementally, maybe starting just to incorporate certain types of questions into your team meetings. We have, as part of that resource guide, we have through KTSIS, 25 great open-ended questions, or different types of questions you can ask clients that will really open up and engage the conversation and lead you down a path. This is for the folks that may be familiar. This is Jocko Willink. He's a former Navy SEAL, but he's written a bunch of books. And I think he hits the nail on the head here as we summarize and finish up the presentation.
One day in the gym is basically imperceivable. 2 days in the gym, you don't recognize any change whatsoever. 100 days in the gym, and you're almost a new person. One day of playing guitar, you can barely play one chord. 100 days of practicing guitar, and you can play literally almost any song. When you do anything, it adds up. When you do nothing, it amounts to 0. So take the small steps every day. Do what you're supposed to do. And don't expect some incredible results in 1 day or 2 days or 10 days. Worthwhile things take 100 days. They take 500 days. Maybe they take 5,000 days. They take time. And whatever it is you want to do isn't going to happen in 1 day. You have work to do. And I know it's just a little bit. I know it's just a little tiny movement forward, but that work is what it takes.
So I think that really kind of sums it up in terms of these incremental. If you see, probably many of you in this room, those that have really high EQ, they're masters at asking open-ended questions or drawing something out of somebody or engaging somebody that maybe isn't engaged in the conversation, or being able to say, hey, John, I sense something's off. Is everything okay with you and your family? And start talking about children, grandchildren. And you can start this, a lot of these tools and skills that we're talking about, you can start them at any age. And so I've done it with my son. His name's Caden. His favorite football player is CeeDee Lamb. I'm from Boston, so sorry, any Patriots fans. But he's put his own warrior code. And some of these, he gets in every single day. And some of them he doesn't. But it's work in progress, and it sets something for him. I personally like number 12, which is remember to flush the toilet. But, hey. But the point is we have a lot of tools and resources I think you can leverage. And there's no question about it in terms of where the industry is going. If you think about the Wealth 1.0, and I remember when I was a financial advisor for a period of time, the guys who started off in the corner offices, many of them were just stockbrokers, and I saw them move from the corner offices to the pit, et cetera, because they didn't evolve their business. And the ones that did, who were stock pickers, they started pairing up with CFP, younger generation, started creating the next generation of leadership, but also evolving their business and continuing to grow their business as opposed to letting it stall. And so there's no question about it that Wealth 3.0 is where it's going. It may feel very awkward right now, but I promise you, in probably 3 or 5 years from now, you'll be like, wow, it's a skill I should have worked on or should work on. And if you do so, as Jocko says, the results will be there. So thank you for taking the time. If you haven't, and if you want to receive one, we have a resource guide that has everything from how do you engage a client in family meetings that has multiple generations, to the questions we talked about, to books and resources such as the Silver Spoon Kid that you could give to your clients that really adds a lot of value if they have things that they're thinking about in terms of making sure that their children, grandchildren, multiple generations are prepared to inherit. They understand also the value and the purpose that went in terms of how hard these generations work to build this wealth and what it means and what it should mean to the future generation. So feel free to scan the code. Thank you for taking the time, and if you have questions, we'll be around afterwards.
Thank you.